I'm Eily, in case you don't know. I'm here to talk to you today about the psychology of personality and behaviour. And specifically I'm going to be talking about the Myers-Briggs personality test, which is one that, when I studied psychology, we all had to do. And it's actually really interesting. It's good fun. It gives you some great insight into yourself. So, to give you a bit of background as well, I haven't really gone through this on a presenting level yet, so it could be a little bit stilted, but I'm sure you guys will be working with me through this. So, the first thing I want to do is discuss behaviour and personality and the differences between the two. So, behaviour is defined by the way in which one acts or conducts oneself, especially towards others. Now, I actually don't believe that behaviour is driven by how people act towards others. I believe that behaviour is sort of intrinsically, so you internally are driven by behaviours, it's driven by biological things, it's driven by your nature, your nurture, which I'll move into more later. So, and also, there's another sort of thing I want to touch on is you have like an inherent set of values which are ingrained into you. They could be, again, driven by perhaps your parents' morals, perhaps your own morals, perhaps things that you have grown up with, potentially even biological reasons. So, psychology, when it comes to behaviour, it concerns itself with observable events. So everybody has certain ways of behaving. I have certain ways of presenting, which I'm sure you're all going to observe as I'm standing up here. I quite often present with my hands open, because I want you guys to be able to connect with me, to be able to listen to what it is that I'm saying, to be able to understand what it is that I'm saying, and also agree with me, because I love it when people agree with me. So personality, on the other hand, is obviously different. So these are characteristics or qualities, traits perhaps, that form an individual's distinctive character. So I believe, and not everybody agrees with this, I believe that your personality is actually something that you form and shape as you grow. They are things that happen to you in your life. They are the people that surround you that actually form your personality for you and with you. I have this interesting theory, and I've discussed it at length with some of you, that we are primarily shaped by the 5 closest people to us in our life, which is why your personality can adapt and change, but you always hold on to those core morals. So 5 closest people, that could be your partner, it could be your family, it could be your work people. Everybody spends a third of their daily life at work, so it's quite easy to believe that your colleague that sits next to you, your manager who you deal with on a daily basis, is somebody that helps shape who you are and who you become as a person. So personality is not necessarily flexible. Sorry, I should say that. Personality is flexible, but again, there are those core values that you keep as a person and individual. Like, for example, unless you're predestined to do so, you're not going to go out and murder somebody. So, as most of you will have these moral beliefs that, homicide is wrong. So, this slide touches on why do we want to understand behaviour. So, as humans, we are curious. We always want to know the why. We are scared of things that we don't understand. So, for us, we are inherently curious to understand what it is that other people, what motivates other people, what inspires other people, what causes them to do the things that they want to do, and that they do in life. So, for corporate organisations, they want to understand people for profit. So, this makes sense. Obviously, in working in a travel industry, we want to understand what motivates people to travel. We want to understand what inspires people to travel. We also want to understand how to make things easy. That obviously ties into things like user experience, usability testing, user testing, all that kind of stuff. So corporates obviously have a very strong reason as to why. So how do we do this? Now, I touched on this from just a psychology background perspective and an organisational background perspective, because I studied both. So from psychology, we obviously use things like personality tests. We observe behaviour. So we identify traits in people using things like the Myers-Briggs personality test, which is something I'm going to move into shortly, and using all kinds of things, observations. So the best interviews that I've ever sat in on is somebody actually specifically there observing someone's behaviour, and somebody actually specifically there observing somebody's responses. So linguistics, which I'm about to move into, linguistics, and physical behaviour, physical actions. Just to talk on organisations. So obviously organisations, if they are trying to understand consumer behaviour, they do things like personality tests. What they will do is they'll get in a user group, they'll run through personality tests, they will try and identify, okay, well, there's a particular trait here for our small medium enterprises, there's a particular trait here for our general consumers. They'll also discuss through personas. Now, just to give you a quick touch on personas, what that is it's generally an amalgamation of a particular user group that's presented in a pretty much just a text form. You can have a person, you can give them a name, so you can, for example, I use Last Minute. Last Minute had Lily, where there was a great persona. So Lily was a particular age female who had particular interests, and every marketing campaign that was done, every bit of IT work that was done, it was in a way trying to gear towards Lily to make sure that it was something that our target market could definitely approve of and definitely will buy, purchase, interact with. And then obviously analytics. So I often discuss this. Analytics is what people do. Personas are driven more to the why people do it. Okay, so when we talk about observable behaviors, we discuss things like verbals and nonverbals. So my nonverbals are how I'm presenting. My verbals are the words that I'm using, obviously, as I'm presenting, and the way I express things, the way I discuss things. So there's a really, really interesting, and I would like to touch on this in perhaps another text talk, is body language. So adjusting your own body language. So say you're conscious that when you present or when you sit at your desk, that you're like this, you're hunched, you're over, you are feeling insecure, that you're giving off that almost standoffish physical behavior, and other people can see that. If I sit there at my desk like this, looking worried or focused into my desk, it's what's wrong, are you okay? You know, if I sit there confidently, sitting back, and I'm open to suggestion, I'm open to people coming to me, coming to approach me, obviously I'm exhibiting more confidence. Now, if you're not comfortable to actually do that, to sit back and do that, fair enough. But there's biological studies out there that actually prove that if you sit there and you stand there open up, and you have your feet on the ground, you're sturdy, you're confident, you actually release chemicals in your body, which give you more confidence, and give you more confidence to your brain. So your actual physical behavior can manifest itself and work its way mentally for you. So you can actually become more confident by portraying yourself to be more confident. So linguistics are verbals. So the quality of our social life, as our species, is determined in large measure by how and what we can communicate. So using words, the way we discuss things. Just bringing off into a slight tangent here. When we discuss things like verbals, it often brings me into a time when in psychology when we studied disorders, and we touched on autism. And unfortunately obviously autism is a spectrum. So autistic at the higher end of the spectrum who really have struggle communicating. This touches very much on linguistics and is finding out alternative ways to communicate with people who maybe aren't able to express themselves verbally. So as humans, we need both of these things to communicate. And if we don't have one of these things, we try and overcompensate in the other area. So I touched on this earlier, nature versus nurture. So my mum has great morals. And I would say that I take my morals from my mother and my father. I would say that there are people who I've come across in my life who do not have very good morals. But maybe they do. Maybe they think they do. You know? It really depends on what you're grown up with. And that's part of your nature. Part of your nurture. So your nature is your core biological behaviors. So which is when you discuss things like fear. What makes you afraid? What makes you scared? You're standing in the middle of the road, a car's coming towards you. You're going to be afraid. If you're not afraid, there's something wrong with you. That should release adrenaline in your brain. It should make you want to run, make you want to go. Safety, I want to be secure, I want to be safe. Sex could be your gender, could be the need for it. No? Biological. Psychological behaviors, so these are your morals, your communication, these are the things that you were grown up with, these are the things that were imprinted on you as you grew up. So this all leads back into, can your behaviors change, can your personality change? I believe it can. I believe it can adapt. Again, I believe you keep the same morals. So just the difference between them. Behavior is what we do, personality is why we do it. Now, there's a number of frameworks of personality and personality tests. The one that I quite often will touch on, and I'll go into it in a little bit, is the Myers-Briggs personality test, 16 types. Now, this is a very simple, roughly 50 question questionnaire test. That Myers-Briggs, and actually it's based off a framework by Carl Gustav Jung. I'll go into that another time, very long. But Myers-Briggs adapted it for this test. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to be able to class people into 16 different personality types based on a number of 4 dichotomies. So there's a number of assumptions that we make here when we discuss this, and that is behavior is predictable, and understanding your personality type is advantageous. And it is. Understanding what it is that drives you and motivates you you can identify your limitations. It leaves you open to feedback. So if somebody says to you, you know what, I think you're really introverted. And you can go, well, yeah, actually, that's what my personality test says. That's cool. I'm all right with that. I can do that. It also leaves you open to feedback. Again, that. And acceptance of who you are as a person. So one of the reasons I do want to touch on this very quickly, because I'm conscious I'm talking, and time's running out. Your personality assessment helps eliminate wrong factors and negative attitudes, and allows you as a person to understand your driving attitudes and forces behind your behaviour. It's why it's important to understand your personality type. So WTF are 16 types. Essentially what it is if you can see this as a column, 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 and these are obviously different levels. So you can either be E or I, you can either be S or A, you can either be T or F, J or P. So I don't know if you can actually see those there, but I'll bring them up quickly for you. So E is extroverted, I is introverted. So generally what they like to say is that you can be one or the other. S is sensing, N is intuitive. Sensing is usually something that's very core, very basic, so I sense that this is how a situation is going to go. Intuitive is, I sense this is how a situation is going to go, but these are the reasons why. So it's actually exploring the reasons why. Thinking is, you make tough decisions based on maybe some practical observations. Feeling is, you go with your gut feel. Judging and perceiving, so again, judging is sort of thinking about something a little bit further. Perceiving is how you perceive a thing around you to be. I could have probably talked for about 15 minutes just on these, but bear with me, because I'm going to give you guys some homework to do. So, again, these are sort of the difference between the two. I would say that extroversion and introversion, basically it's the things that you receive, whether you derive satisfaction out of things outside of you, whether you derive satisfaction out of things into you. Perceive or take in information, again, sensing or intuition. How we prefer to make decisions, whether we go with our gut feel or whether we go with something that we've made as a logical decision. And how we orientate ourselves to the external world. So judgment and perception. This is me. I'm ENFJ. Now, I have done this test for once a year for the last 12 years. And every single year, I have been ENFJ. It has not changed. This year, I had an interesting little adaptation to this. So, when you do these personality tests, they usually give you the percentages for your extroversion, your percentage for all the different letters. So typically I've been classed as a 20 to 30% extrovert, and this year I was 1%. So this year means that something has changed within me. Maybe it's how I'm conducting myself, maybe I've had an epiphany somewhere, who knows? But for me, that's an interesting thing that I need to analyse further myself. And this is why I think it's worthwhile setting a benchmark for yourself and doing it once a year, every year, if you can. It makes you very introverted, which is perhaps what I'm becoming. So that's just a little, I'm not going to bother reading that out, it's just a little summary on me. But a lot of that I would agree with, some of that I wouldn't. And what you'll find is when you do these tests and you get these 4 letters and you research your 4 letters, is that you will agree with some things and you'll disagree with other things. Absolutely. So, just to kind of give you an idea of the types of ways that this has been used, pretty much every TV show, if there's fan people out there, quite often they'll grab all the Games of Thrones characters and they'll give them one of these personality types. So, the Simpsons one is one that I found, which I thought was pretty cool. So you got Homer Simpson. He's an ESFP, which gives him an idea. Here and now person, highly social, enjoys adventures, very extroverted. I'd probably disagree with the end, personally. I don't know whether he's a great problem solver, but maybe there's aspects of his craziness that allows him to solve problems pretty well. So Marge Simpson. I have a theory that the reason why these two get together is because of the difference in their letters, and the reason why they actually work together as a couple. So she's introverted, which makes sense. The difference in the letters is that she's ISFJ and he is ESFP. So there's judgment and perceiving there, which is interesting, which actually means that they complement each other. This is very typical of Marge. I would say that I would pretty much agree to everything of this little statement here. She doesn't seek authority, or she doesn't seek positions of authority. She has attention to detail, she's stable, she's in control. So she basically complements everything that Homer is a bit crazy. Bart Simpson. Oh yeah, persuader. I would agree with that, definitely. He is the one that gets everybody else into trouble. He's extroverted, he's out there, he's here and now, he's all about he's actually a bit of a leader. So if he was a little bit more stable as a personality type, he would actually be a great leader. He would be able to motivate people. He'd be able to get people to go along with him. We've already seen him get other people into trouble. It happens. Straight shooters, he's able to handle criticism. So Lisa is an INFJ. This shouldn't surprise you. This is actually a very rare type. So as far as personality types go, if you're an INFJ, you are exceptionally rare. And if you're a man, you're even rarer. Apparently it's far more common for women to be an INFJ. Let's talk about the male versus female debate later. So they're introspective, caring, sensitive, gentle, complex. Absolutely, absolutely. And this is all the things that I would describe Lisa as. She's highly intuitive, empathetic, dedicated listeners. Tell me what's wrong, sign on their forehead. Absolutely. All of those, except I'm an E. All those open today. Now, if you're interested, there are 2 options here for you to take this test. The first one, there's yes and no options. The yes and no options is the second one. The first one is a slider. So it's actually quite hard to answer yes and no to some of these questions, so you can put preference. If you guys are keen, I'll send you all out the links. Tell me what you are. Research your personality type. Each of these sites have their own little summaries on what an ENFJ is or what an ISTP is, and all those. So highly worthwhile doing. Does anybody have any questions?
When will you talk about the male-female?
That's another presentation. That's probably going to take longer than 18 minutes.
You said about margins and seek authority, but one episode you became a cop, right?
This is true, and I actually think that was significantly outside of something that she would ever normally do. So there's a thing that we would call in the fandom out of character, OOC, and I say it was typically OOC for her. I feel like there was a different showrunner on that episode, or a different person that was writing that episode that was outside of the typical norm, because she doesn't seek positions of authority, but she commands it. And people listen to her if she says, but, you know, eat your dinner. He might give up a little shit about it, but eventually he will sit down and eat his dinner, because she kind of commands that authority, but she doesn't seek the positions of it, so she doesn't go out and hunt for it, but other people will label that for her. I remember that episode, but I can't remember if she was offered the role of a cop, or if actually somebody said, hey, I think you should be a cop.
And she was persuaded.
She persuaded, there you go.
So do you analyse people when you talk to them and put that in those 16 boxes?
It's actually really hard to give somebody each of these 4 letters. So if I was to talk to somebody, I can identify pretty quickly, well actually sometimes incorrectly, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, whether somebody is an extrovert or introvert. That's probably one of the quickest and easiest things to find out. Some people you will think, oh my god, I'm really surprised that person, or I'm really surprised that you think I'm an extrovert, I'm actually an introvert. And some people masquerade and portray themselves in different ways, and actually makes it really interesting, and usually makes it quite complex for people. For the rest of the letters, like the intuitive or sensing, thinking or feeling, judging or perception, you pick those up as you sit in meetings with people, or as you see people work, or as you see them hold themselves in daily life. There's certain things that you can pick up based on how they talk to you, based on their personality. So this comes down to your morals and everything else as well. So I can spot pretty quickly whether or not somebody is making a judgment based on gut feel, or making a judgment based on something that they have maybe authority over, and say, hey, previously I've had this experience, and that's why I think this is right.
Is there much research around the conversion from an extrovert or introvert?
I don't know, that's something I've got to research myself.
Sounds like you're doing one of your own studies, you're 1% away.
Yeah, 1%, really bizarre. But I think the reason why I suggest you do it once a year every year, so you won't remember the questions, but you won't remember your answers. And that's why I would suggest that you do it once a year every year. Like I said, I've been doing it for 12, I've remained the same for 12. This one year threw up something really random. And I recommend doing it at a time when you're not going through emotional turmoil, strife, I don't know, deaths, births, weddings, scary, all that kind of stuff. Don't do it around those times of period, because that will skew your results, that will skew how you say something. Because if, say you're organising a wedding, your own wedding, the last thing you want to do is probably go out socially, right? So you actually will probably, say you're typically an extrovert, you'll probably score a low, or you'll probably score as an introvert, just purely because those other things that are affecting you are affecting this result as well. So, but that's, I do need to do some research on extroversion versus introversion. I'm just wondering if it was wrong for the last 12 years.
On that.
Maybe you were wrong.
I did read an article about how you can change from extrovert to introvert, so, which seems easier to change than the other 3, but I don't know about that either. I'd be interested.
I think the other 3 are like morally, they're part of your as you grow up, your nurture, I think, and that's why there's moral, like I said, moral beliefs, things like murder and stuff like that, that you already intrinsically know that there's something like that is wrong. And I think that's why things like the other three letters are hard to spot, because they are usually something that's been ingrained in you since you were very young.
Do you think that people could be multiple, like make themselves multiple, so they could be a certain way and they could change themselves next year and they could change themselves and then they can just be whoever they want to be?
So it's an interesting concept, and that's why I talk about the fact that personality is flexible, and I think that there's a lot of external factors that can affect how you portray yourself and how you think you are yourself. I was actually reading something the other day on there's three types of personality. There's how other people see you, how you see you, and how you actually are. And I think it's a hard question to ask. I think people can change. It's just when I have done this with my friends, and all of us do this once every year, no one has ever changed E to I or I to E, but they have always changed quite frequently. I've had people go from an N to an S or a P to a J. And for the reasons why, it's hard. It's hard to know why. And it's also hard to understand what motivates people to change, or what has impacted them in their life that has caused them to change. There could be a number of external factors. So I believe it is flexible to a point. But I think if you, say for example, I do this test, right? Like I was saying, I was 30% extrovert, right? That was the class, based on my answers for the last X amount of years. And now all of a sudden I'm 1%. There's an extreme jump. Whereas if somebody was 5% extrovert, and now all of a sudden they're 1% extrovert, it's like, yeah, okay, I can understand that. And that's usually what I have seen when I have seen the change and flexibility between the two, is that it's not as extreme as 30% jump, it's usually as extreme as 5%. You know? And that's to be expected, I think.
Just quickly, do the personality tests speak to different social situations, like work versus home versus friends versus colleagues?
Yes, so they talk about what you do at home. So for example, I forgot, I was showing you some of the examples up here. What they do is, one of the questions is, do you prefer to be, when you're out in a group, do you prefer to be in the middle of the group or to the side? And then they say, when you're at home, do you like being at home alone, or do you prefer to go out? And they talk about work. At work, do you confront situations or do you let them roll over? How do you make decisions at work? So that they give you, the one that I frequently do is 50 questions. It's a yes or no, because I prefer to have direct answers. I've done the other one, I still get the same result. So, but that one kind of is quite confronting, and it's like, yeah, okay, I've got to make a decision, yes or no. And it is geared towards the three situations: at home, at work, social.
Do you feel like you can be different personalities, that you have different personalities in different situations?
Yes, definitely. I would say that when I'm at home, I'll put myself on the spot here. When I'm at home, I'm by myself. I stick my headphones in. I'm very closed off. When I'm at work and in social situations, and I often talk to you guys about the fact that I actually don't like going out in social situations. I find it really hard to go out. And once I'm out, I'm fine. But it's that oh my god, I have to be social. Once I'm out, I'm actually fine. At work, I'm quite open as well. I'm obviously forthcoming. I like to think I'm approachable. So I definitely think that you can portray yourself in different ways. But all of that, which is why you have those three areas that the questions ask you on. Because if you are particularly introverted at home and you're extremely extroverted at work, the test balances that for you.
How do you use these insights in your work, in your life?
My own personal. So I know, for example, that, like I said, that imbalance, which I'm focused on obviously, the change. I can see that now in work. I can see there's things and decisions and behaviours and what I'm involved in and what I make myself involved in. I can see how that has affected my E to I, say. But things like whether or not I am a perception or judgment, absolutely. So whether I'm intuitive or sensing, definitely I'm intuitive. Oh my god, I'm intuitive. You know, that's what I was going. And then obviously feeling. So I apply it in every time I approach a problem. I can see the way that my brain works, and I can see why I'm making the decision that I'm making. So for me, it helps me get to a point. So I know as well then where my weaknesses are. So I need to go to somebody that's going to not do it by gut feel, that's going to perhaps give me a bit more numbers behind it, or say, hey, Eily, I think you're being wrong about this. So I can spot my weaknesses, definitely, and I think that helps me work.
You're saying you're trying to attribute the 30% to 1% of friends. Just, do you think living country is a...
Well, I don't know. Good question. I don't necessarily think so. I think it's. I think if anything, that should actually make me be a little bit more outgoing, a little bit more to myself. Perhaps, and I actually was really shocked. I would have expected it to be the other way. Like I would have perhaps become more extroverted because I'm excited, but I'm also not. So maybe.
So you put so much. Just something on it myself. Yeah, you put so much energy into the moving that you don't actually need to. I found
yeah,
so
wind down.
I went.
Yeah.
Is it 30% to 1% the whole time you've been doing it, or just from like last year?
Last year to this year. So usually it sits around 30% every year. So it goes 22, 30, 25, 30, 22, 28. And then this year was like 1%. I was like, what did I do? So, I mean, I'm not too worried. Everything changes every space. So, I mean, next year I could do it and I could be 50%.
You did change job last year, so...
You know what? It could be. It could be. That was quite an impact. I could probably do another presentation on that if you want. That was how not to run a business.
That's the question. You talked about 4 or 5 people you think have a big impact. Do you subscribe to the idea that people start looking like their pets after a while?
So,
Are you talking about me?
No,
everyone felt guilty right there. And they also look like their wives and husbands.
Yes, I agree with that.
So does that look or behave?
Whatever you want to be, Chris.
I think that people do start, people take cues from other people, right? They see what's socially acceptable around them, and unfortunately, no matter how much we try to be independent thinkers and independent people, there are certain aspects and facets to us that we end up conforming to the people around us. Definitely,
and the animals.
Potentially the animals. I think that human beings, they're like for like. And I often talk about survival and fear, and fear drives us. Fear of the unknown, and I think that unfortunately there's like an ingrained trait in all of us as humans that we want to conform to be like other people, but we still want to be independent thinkers. So yes, I would say absolutely that husbands and wives start looking like wives and wives, husbands, husbands, definitely.
I've got something to say on the animal.
Okay.
I would say it starts entering into the part where you start seeing the personalities that you're lacking or wanting or desiring in the animal, and then they portray that, they take on those personalities. And that's why when you see people alone, like Last Man on Earth, or someone that's on an island, say, he has a Wilson ball and then makes a personality out of that.
Yes.
Because we're not natively alone creatures.
No, we're
we
not.
need to be more than one. And that drives personality as well.
Absolutely. To give you an idea though, my partner is every opposite letter to me. So.
Cool. Last question. Bye-bye.
Serious question. I've had a couple of definitions of extrovert and introvert. Right? So the first one is that I think most people accept is an extrovert is someone who's really outgoing and they're always around people, and that's because they propel this energy from the inside. But more recently I've heard the definition of extrovert as someone who requires energy from other people to, they can't sort of, they talk about introverts being able to, they're alone by themselves because they're able to drive that mechanism, whereas extroverts require people around them to like, and so in these tests, which, do you know where?
I don't know. And I wonder if you've been talking to Sharon, because, no. Because he and I have had this discussion. And that's where I'm wondering if my difference from E to I has occurred. Because perhaps I was interpreting it differently earlier. Now typically the theory, you're right, that people subscribe to is the first one. It's I like to be outgoing. And there's another theory that says, well, actually as an extrovert, I derive satisfaction from that around me. Introvert, I derive the energy from myself, or perhaps I take things in internally. And that's where I'm introverted. As it is, I wonder if these subscribe to the older psychological concepts of the initial definition that you gave there. And I think they probably do, but saying that, depending on, so when you read it, right, so when you actually get your ENFJ and INFP and everything else, when you get those results, that's when you want to research your own personality and go, okay, actually, this definition of extroversion, yeah, that applies to me. Or say, well, I disagree with that because actually that's my definition of more like an introvert. And that's kind of how they're describing it.
I think you categorised it quite nicely earlier in terms of behaviour and personality. A lot of people assume extroversion and introversion is behaviour when it's a personality.
Yeah.
So it's not an observable thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah. And what does it matter really?
Yeah.
The later definition sounds like it was written by an introvert who was a bit pissed off and kind of was happy
so
to...
I have Dinusha's Myers-Briggs results, right? And it says for extrovert the preference for drawing energy from outside world of people, activities, and things. Yeah. That's how they define it.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. And I think is that from the Myers-Briggs site?
Yeah, this is the whole report.
Yeah. So I think that definition is actually lifted straight from the Myers-Briggs site.
Yeah.
As that's what I was reading today.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and again, like I said, when you actually read your results, your specific results, because you know, like I said, there's 16. You've got 8 letters. There's 16 types that you can get. And when you read your specific results, it's whether or not that applies to you.
I wonder if yours changed because the test was different or the definition changed.
Definitions have remained the same, tests have remained the same. You'll see when you click on one of those links, you'll be like, yeah, okay, that's definitely from 12 years ago. So, cool. Thank you so much.